Welcome everyone. It's good to be here with you tonight. I'd like to thank you for your kind messages and words and uh, prayers and meditations over this last week. It's been a great help to me and my family in the wake of losing you know, my niece, my sister and brother-in-law's daughter. My youngest niece lost her older sister, part of her, and my mother lost her first granddaughter. So it was in the midst of that kind of devastation, I think is an accurate word. There was a force, a benevolent, buoyant force that I felt throughout all of it. And I know where that comes from. It comes from your generosity and compassion. So I want to thank you for that. We talk about the refuges of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Buddha being simply our own innate awakened nature, not necessarily the historical Buddha, but what that Buddha was and represents. And then there's the refuge of Dharma, of wisdom, of that also that force that can help guide us to suffer less and help us to realize really what it is that we are. And when we can begin to understand who and what we really are, we truly are, then everything has its place, has a place. And there is nothing that is out of place. There is nothing that is right or wrong. What I can say about my own experience in this last week is that regardless of what I was thinking or feeling, no matter what kind of pain I was feeling, I knew that it wasn't wrong and it wasn't out of place. It just simply what what was happening. And so if we can, remember that when we're faced with challenges, then we don't have to fight what is. And that is a lot less suffering. That is fewer arrows. And the other refuge that I certainly um, noticed was the refuge of Sangha, of people around me, near and far, who uh, uh, whose presence was there, even if they weren't directly in my company. It's an amazing blessing to have a group of people to practice with, to to be on this path with, uh, in the language of our ongo, to fall apart and come back together again with. To fall down and to get up again with. It's truly a blessing. I'm incredibly grateful for um, coming into contact with this path and these teachings that are so helpful. To have a Sangha to practice with. To have the practiced ability to stay with my experience, no matter how uncomfortable or painful it is. Having gained the experience and wisdom to know that whatever it is that I'm experiencing in the moment will not last. It's very helpful to realize that in the midst of what's unexpected. And also to notice that um, even as I felt the bereavement of losing my niece, or the grief that comes on its heels, that nothing is wrong. The universe isn't wrong. That it's a part of this being human. And I feel so grateful that I have learned these skills and tools to not have to fear my own experience anymore. To know that I can sit and be grounded and allow all of this to simply pass through. If we can maintain an open heart and an open mind. I came back again and again to Hongji, actually. To his very first instruction in cultivating the empty field. And also in his guidepost of silent illumination. The field of boundless emptiness is what exists from the very beginning. You must purify, cure, grind down, and brush away all the tendencies you have fabricated into apparent habits. Then you can reside in the clear circle of brightness. That's the very beginning of cultivating the empty field. And in the guidepost of silent illumination, he says, in the daytime, the sun, in the night, the moon. Each in turn does not blind the other. This is how a patch-robed monk steadily practices, naturally, without edges or seams. To gain such steadiness, you must completely withdraw from the invisible pounding and weaving of your ingrained ideas. We might say, identity. If you want to be rid of this invisible turmoil, you must just sit through it and let go of everything. And really, in the wake of such loss, I can't think of better suggestion. Than to just sit down and let it be. So I think I've said enough for tonight. But I welcome any comments.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for sharing.
I had a visit today from Sandy, Mark's wife,
Oh, good.
and I learned from her. She's so solid. I
Mm,
mean, just so. Mark Tyson used to call her stoic, and she's very um, opposite of me because I seem to be all over the place sometimes. And we sat here for an hour or so, and it makes me feel, Mark, and because I saw them many times when they were together, especially at their house. But also, it just does it makes me think of him, but in a different way, like letting go in a way.
mm,
So I feel like she's an example of that, strongly um, working on her own projects, and she's talking about taking a trip for a week Monday up to Washington State, and
mm.
she just I just learn from her. I learn a lot from her, even if we don't talk about it. You know, I mean, I feel um, really happy that we're in contact. We started out being friends, and through the years, it's mostly been about my friendship with Mark, and she's been there sometimes when I'm visiting him, but and it just makes me think about my own how I deal with things, and it's not always letting go. That's for sure. No.
Yeah. No, it's not always letting go. It's letting go and then holding on and trying to pull it back and then letting go again and pulling it back. Yeah. Yeah, it's a process. It's not an event. It's a process. I've had this experience before, and I think I've had it every time that I lose somebody. It's so interesting how the tendrils of grief interconnect. Like it will bring up past losses, past relationships, past things. This time it felt a little bit different. It felt like, the uh, tension that water has, if you put your finger in a glass of water, how the um, surface tension will actually come up and meet where it's touching. And it felt like that. It felt like, oh, somebody just needed to say something, and all of the grief would come up to the surface like that. And it wasn't just grief for my niece, grief for Taizan, grief for my father who died in January, grief of, others I've lost in the past. It's it's very interesting to notice how that happens and helpful because if we don't understand it, it's very easy to get overwhelmed by it. That's why it's so helpful to cultivate wisdom and have that uh, help us with our experience.
I feel overwhelmed. I'm getting rid of my cable very soon because of what's going on in the Middle East. And Sandy said something today, if we can't do something about something, being upset and, you know, like if there's nothing you can do, then you shouldn't be totally um, involved in it or stressed about it because that's not helping the person, me or her, and it certainly isn't helping anybody over there. But it's to me, it's been very overwhelming. I'm sure for everybody. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's so much going on in the world. There really always is. There's so much suffering, so much, and really, and I know I've said it before, but one of the most challenging things for me, anyway, I've heard others talk about it too, um, is uh, not to be overwhelmed by samsara, not to get so caught up in it. Like if I were, to use um, this example of losing my niece, you know, if I were to um, focus on it all the time, it would be uh, very intense and uh, hard to hard to cope with. There were many unanswered questions about how she died, whether uh, it was an accident or whether somebody gave her a fatal dose of narcotics. And so there's many, many unanswered questions around it. And it's very easy and to want to create stories and narratives to fill that space or to make sense of things, to create a narrative and a story. And it's a very natural inclination, but um, it's truer uh, and perhaps more skillful to notice that inclination and not create the story, but really learn how to be, to tolerate ambiguity. You know, whether it's that or whether it is a current war in the Middle East, there's no shortage of suffering. There's no shortage of despair. And one of the most difficult things about the path of a bodhisattva is being present to it and yet not be overwhelmed by it. And I truly believe that the greatest thing that we can do is to um, heal ourselves, to um, to attain enlightenment, as it were, for the benefit of all beings. So to to take what we've learned, to cultivate the compassion that we learn and take it into the world. And that may simply mean that we bring calm to those around us, bring a lack of judgment to those around us. To not give in to the inclination to lash out, to judge, to anger. But to work, as we say in psychological terms, work with what is happening within us so that we don't project it out into the world. That is huge. And that's where the healing of the world begins. You know, many believe that the Buddha was a great physician. He was a physician to the world. And it was in precisely that way, that he took his experience of recognizing his own awakened nature and taught it to others so that they could do the same, so that they could teach it to others. That's the wise way, the skillful way of making the world a better place. And it all begins with our own practice, regulating our own emotions, regulating our own thoughts, grinding down, as Hongji says, those habits we have of thought. So even if it feels like we can't do anything, we can actually do something. It's never hopeless. Now, if you create an expectation that you're going to change the world and save the world, then you're in for a lot of disappointment. But if we can hone our own energetic quality, our own resonance, then we can invite others into that resonance, whether it's compassion or whether it's hate. That will happen. So let's work hard to make sure it's compassion. I'm forgetting who it was. I'm forgetting his name right now. He was a Cambodian priest. Hopefully name will come to me. But during the time of the Khmer Rouge, he had a temple, and even in the refugee camps, he created a Buddhist temple, and he was threatened. His life was threatened. People were threatened. The Khmer Rouge threatened the people that if they showed up to this temple, that they and their relatives would be hunted down. But he created this temple, and he invited people, and I forget how many people came. It was incredible. It was like 20,000 people showed up to this makeshift Buddhist temple. And they hadn't practiced, they hadn't, been allowed to practice for years during that horrible time in their history, but they showed up. And all of these people who had lost so much, they had lost relatives, everything. everything. Just people killed in front of them, their loved ones killed right there. They showed up. And what he said was, from the very beginning words of the Dhammapada, what do you say to these people who have lost everything? And what he said was, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. And he just started to chant that over and over again. And then the people started to chant that over and over again. And that wisdom, that pointing to our own awakened, infinite, compassionate nature was the only thing really large enough to contain all of that tremendous suffering that had happened. That hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. And that was the beginning of their healing. Such a powerful truth. And we begin to heal the world by healing ourselves in just that way. So, don't lose hope. There's always hope if we can remember who and what we are. Anyone else? Well, thank you all for your practice, for your effort and your intention and your commitment to having a quiet mind and an open heart. So I will look forward to seeing you all next week. Next Tuesday, if you're participating in the Ango, is the Chosan, the group practice discussion, Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. So feel free to join us there. and I wish you all well.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Be well.
Wish you well too. Ollie.
Thank you.
Thank you.